Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Yo, dear listeners, welcome back to the show. Today I have Coach Jeremiah Bair on. And since you're very sharp listeners, when we get to the interview, you may notice that the way I introduce the podcast is different from the title that I ended up giving to the podcast. And that's because I was reflecting on the interview and I realized that what we truly talked about is how to stop chronically underfueling and potentially over-exercising without getting the results that you want, and how to make a mindset change and how to apply resistance training and nutrition in order to truly transform your physique and improve your health. And that's the reason for this little intro. I wanted to course correct the original introduction. And now, without further ado, let's get into the show. Yo, welcome back to the podcast, dear listeners. Today, I'm sitting with Jeremiah Bair, who is a fellow coach. And we're going to talk all about body recomposition, that is fat loss and muscle gain, particularly for women who make up the majority of Jeremiah's clients, as far as I'm concerned, and I consider him kind of an authority in this particular space. Having said that, if you're a non-binary person and you were assigned female at birth and you're not currently on masculinizing hormones, the conversation is going to apply to you as well. So, before we get started, Jeremiah, thank you very much for being here today.
Of course, I am honored to be here. I believe we originally chatted in 2021, is that right?
We did.
So yeah, no, it's super cool to hear about how well you've done, to hear about your growth as a coach, and I'm honored to be here. I'm very excited for this conversation.
And so am I. So the question with which I always open is, who are you? What do you do? And why are you so awesome at it?
Oh man. Um, all right. So again, my name is Jeremiah Bair. I am located in Phoenix, Arizona, and I am the founder of our company, Elevated Coaching Systems. So basically, I am part of a team of 4 coaches. It is myself, Tass, who hails from across the pond for me in London. We have, shout out to the Brits, we have Andrea, who is in Bentonville, Arkansas, and we have Natalie, who is in Washington, D.C. So I am the founder of our team. And really, again, like, why are we so awesome at what we do? I think it is more so everyone else on the team versus me. I've always loved all things physique transformation, nerding out over training and nutrition. Honestly, through all of like high school and college, it was really the only thing, to the point I think my parents were pretty concerned about me, and rightfully so. It was really once I got past the stage where it was like RuneScape and video games and things of that nature were all I cared about. I don't know if for the younger crowd of RuneScape even like rings a bell, but
Oh, I'm
anyways.
very well aware.
Okay, I love it. I still like had the urge occasionally to log back in, but once I got past that stage, it was really like building muscle, nutrition training was all I cared about. And even like back then, when I'm 31, so when I graduated high school in like 2011, their online coaching wasn't really even a thing, but I still like had this idea like I want to be a personal trainer, but different, right? Like I want to work with people online and reach more people there and like be able to like create content, which I don't honestly, it's funny to me that I even had these ideas because there wasn't a lot. Like I didn't even know of a single online coach in the space. I knew like of a few content creators and like, hey, this person somehow makes a living doing this. But basically, fast forward to where it's kind of the things that I love as far as training, nutrition, coaching others, writing, all these things have kind of come together very similar to what you were saying, to where it's like just a perfect culmination of what I'm good at aligns with like what my career happened to end up being. Um, but really, then it's been incredible to grow our team because as Natalie, Andrea, Tass have come on board, and that's again like for the last we're over 4 years now since again like Andrea first came on board. It's been so cool to see them grow and even again surpass me as a coach. Where very much I don't do as much coaching as the rest of them do anymore, to where they are such incredible coaches. So again, we're getting back to why am I so awesome at what I do? I really think it is they're very awesome at what they do. They're all so talented, such gifted coaches that they make me look better. But that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you for the introduction. In that case, you're awesome at gathering together the right team.
I guess that's it. That's my power.
All right. So, my first question is, what are the women that you guys coach? What are they usually doing when they join your team? What's their goal and how are they approaching it? And how is the way that they're approaching it at the time holding them back? Just so that all of my listeners know exactly who this podcast is going to be for.
Absolutely. So most of the clients we work with will start coaching saying something like, I want to look leaner and have more shape to my physique, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just I want to lose body fat,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to change the shape of my physique as well. So
Yes.
basically, their goal is typically to have more muscle, but also be leaner. Now, typically, how they've been approaching that before they start is almost always the number one thing I can identify is, or I think the number one way to get to where I want to be is, I just need to lose body fat. So typically, what they have been doing for a very long period of time is just focusing on trying to live on as few calories as possible. Basically, just trying to lose body fat. Now, when we're talking about a physique change, so again, body recomposition, as you mentioned, is essentially going to be losing fat and building muscle at the same time, or changing the ratio of those two things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, so basically, we have two different levers when we look at physique change. We can pull to change your physique. We have fat loss and we have muscle growth. Both of those will change. Those will make you look leaner. But typically, like the mistake and like why this approach has been holding them back is, again, most people have kind of that fat loss lever. They pull that over and over and over again, where it's like we're just pushing that button over and over and over. They've entirely neglected the muscle growth side of things. Now, muscle growth is very important for changing your physique. First, because I mentioned, hey, a lot of these clients' goal is, almost everyone's goal is changing the shape of your physique. Now, especially because we work with a lot of individuals who are already relatively lean. If you are already a pretty lean person, just focusing on fat loss won't really change the shape of your physique that much. We'll basically have a smaller version of the same shape we have.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas building muscle allows us to kind of completely reshape, change or the shape of your physique, but also even like losing body fat. And we can talk about like the different types of body recomposition as well. But when you hear like this idea of body recomposition, again, it's most people think, okay, so I'm losing a lot of body fat and I'm building a lot of muscle at the same time. But honestly, even if it is just like, hey, you're already a lean person, maybe it doesn't make sense for you to diet down any further. But if you just maintain the amount of body fat you have on your frame, so let's say you have 25 pounds of body fat on your frame right now, and let's say you maintain that amount of body fat and we add 6, 7 pounds of muscle, the ratio of lean mass to fat mass will have improved. Your body fat percentage will have decreased. You'll actually look leaner without even dieting, right? So building muscle is such a huge aspect of this. It's almost like a whole new world that people haven't really explored, where there's so much more progress to be made. The issue is when we're living in the state of chronically trying to keep calories as low as possible, chronically dieting, we see things like um, for many individuals, if you're menstruated, maybe you lost your menstrual cycle. Sex hormones aren't in a very good place, so thus it is harder for you to build muscle, recover, things of that nature. We're not as well fueled due to the fact that we're under eating. So again, it's harder for us to build muscle. It's harder to recover. And similarly, I mean, there's a lot. I'm not sure how deep you want to go. Do you want kind of a surface level, and then we can go a deep dive, or do you want me to continue on this road?
No, keep going.
Okay. Then similarly, again, from the training perspective, so the nutrition is a huge part of it, right? Where that's one of the biggest issues we see. It's kind of like 1A and 1B. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I would honestly probably, they're of equal importance. Let's say that. So it's one and one. The nutrition is very important. Underfueling is a big issue for building muscle. We're not well fueled. We're not able to train hard. We're not able to recover as well as we could be if we were better fueled. But similarly, within our training, oftentimes the wrong approach to training as well is a big part of what's being missed, right? Where people often think where as long as I go into the gym and I feel like I worked hard, maybe I worked up a sweat, okay, I should see my body change, right? And I should build muscle. Whereas in reality, there are a lot of different signals that what we're doing in the gym can be sending. And oftentimes it might be like, hey, maybe you're doing something like, do you guys have Orange Theory over there?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, okay. So Orange Theory F45, not that those things are bad, but when it comes to building muscle, we won't be sending the signal that we need. So a lot of times the issue, another one of the biggest issues is that the appropriate training to basically send the signal to our body, hey, we need to add
Hmm.
muscle, is also missing. So I would really say like those are the two biggest things almost
Hmm.
always that are holding the people we work with back when they start with us.
Hmm. And so when somebody comes to you in that position, they've been chronically underfueling,
Mhm.
they're not doing the right type of training, maybe they've even lost their menstrual cycle by trying so hard to lose body fat and get leaner. What is your first step? What's your first phase?
Absolutely. So in a situation like that, it is incredibly rare that we are going to want to try to continue to diet that person.
Hmm.
Now, as a coach, like I know you probably understand, maybe in the most technical sense, they haven't actually been in a calorie deficit
Yeah.
consistent, right? Like maybe across the week, their net deficit isn't enough. This person
Hmm.
probably hasn't been getting leaner for a good period of time.
Yes.
But it could be, hey, 4 to 5 days out of the week, you are in a very large net deficit. And then we're undoing that progress 2 days a week so we don't lose body fat. But your body
Hmm.
still gets the negative adaptations from that. Even like intraday, if you are someone who menstruates, even if throughout the day, all day we're under eating and we're just eating like most of our calories in like one big meal, that in itself can have a negative impact on your menstrual cycle and your sex hormones. So
Hmm.
within that, one of the things we're going to focus on first and foremost is, hey, we want to get you very well fueled. Now, so really when we're talking about body recomposition, I think it's helpful to kind of define like the three different types of body recomposition we typically see.
Hmm.
The first is going to be the more traditional. Hey, you're probably in a more traditional fat loss phase. You're probably losing a decent amount of fat. We're probably seeing the scale drop at a reasonable rate. And you're also building a considerable amount of muscle at the same time. The second type, which is kind of what I'm going to be referring to here, is we're probably right around maintenance. And so your maintenance calorie intake, you're not losing body fat, but and sometimes we will see some fat loss in this as well, but we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But we're getting you well fueled. And again, you're not gaining body fat, but you are building a significant amount of muscle tissue. The ratio of fat mass to lean mass has improved. And thus, you will look leaner. Your body will change a lot. And again, your body fat percentage will have decreased. So, thus, we still saw body recomposition. And then the third type, which I would say most people think they're in this situation, and it's incredibly rare. It's very rare that someone is actually in this situation. Is this is more so like maybe a coach we work with where,
Hmm.
man, you've already been training very well for a very long period of time. Your nutrition has been very dialed in for a long period of time. You have a lot of muscle. Maybe there are a couple things we can dial in further, and we're entering a fat loss phase to where we're getting leaner, and you build a bit of muscle in the process, but your potential to build muscle isn't as great as those first two, and that again is going to be a body recomposition. But most people we work with fall in that second type. So in this instance, a couple of things that we're focused on is first and foremost, um, not first and foremost, again, it's kind of these are both of equal importance, but with nutrition, we'll typically want to start ramping up calories. Now,
Hmm.
within this can be a scary thing. A lot of times we could take like a, hey, so you're reporting you're eating 1,200 calories per day. Maybe we think your maintenance calorie intake is 1,800 or 1,900 calories, but there's a psychological component to this as well, where we do want
Hmm.
to ease into this. So typically it might be, hey, maybe we're going to start you with just 200 to 300 calories higher than you were eating previously, and let's see how your body responds, see how you feel, right? So that will be like total calorie intake over time, us slowly ramping that up based on how their body is responding and the biofeedback signals that we're seeing. That will be an important aspect of this, but also then digging into things like how are we fueling ourselves pre-training and post-training, right? A lot of the individuals that we work with are very type A, very hard charging, almost always like I'll go to the gym at 5 a.m. and I'm almost always like I'm gonna go into that. I'm gonna go into that fasted. Maybe I just drink some coffee. I'm not gonna eat a meal until like noon or one. I'm gonna try to keep my calories as low as I possibly can through the entirety of the day. And then I'm so hungry in the evening. So I have to save a lot of my calories for the last part of the day. Otherwise, I like because I'm so hungry in the evenings, and that can kind of be a scary thing if you're used to that. Now, typically, like the issue why we're so hungry in the evenings is due to keeping calories so low throughout the rest of the day. Whereas when we're in this place where, hey, suddenly what we're focusing on is before we're training, at very least, let's try to elevate muscle protein synthesis, which is basically going to be kind of think of muscle protein synthesis, muscle protein breakdown. Imagine if we have a brick wall, right? We have muscle protein synthesis on one side, muscle protein breakdown on the other. A guy named muscle protein synthesis, a guy named muscle protein breakdown. Muscle protein synthesis is adding bricks to the wall. Muscle protein breakdown is taking bricks away. Right now, that's your muscle growing. At the end of the day, we want the rate of muscle protein synthesis, like how fast he's working, to exceed the rate at which muscle protein breakdown is working. There's different things we can do to elevate both, but basically consuming protein. That'll help us elevate muscle protein synthesis. There's a lot of different things we can do there within that. But basically, okay, so we want to eat some protein before we train. That'll put us in a more optimal position to be recovering and building. Probably want to get some carbs in before we train. We want to make sure you're well hydrated before we go into this training session. Um, and again, like that basic, and this is something that a lot of times it's not like we implement this all at once. A lot of times, because this can be a lot. So it's looking at like what are our biggest priorities first.
Mm-hmm.
First is typically overall calories, protein intake throughout the day,
Mm-hmm.
adequate carbs, plenty of healthy fats, food quality, things of that nature. And then looking at again like that pre-workout meal. And then typically, okay, similarly, it's not like we need to and as I'm sure you're aware, there's not this magical anabolic window. Like we have to have your post-workout meal 30 minutes after your training, you won't make any gains. But eating more, biasing more of our food in that peri-workout window, so pre, intra, post, will typically be a good idea. Again, that'll aid your performance, that'll aid your recovery. If you're training in the morning, again, that'll put us in a more anabolic state. So basically, a state that's more conducive for us to grow. Our body senses, hey, we have plenty of calories coming in. So thus is okay for us to add this calorically expensive tissue, that is muscle. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then alongside that, your nutrient partitioning will be better, right? So around the times we train, our insulin sensitivity is higher. So basically, those calories, carbs that we take in are much more likely to be shuttled to the muscle cell. So again, as we increase food, we'll stay leaner. We'll again, like the ratio of muscle to fat that we're gaining. And again, like in this situation, I wouldn't expect someone to be gaining fat regardless, but this is kind of a good, like, it's a cool idea for most people to like, okay, that makes sense as far as why I should probably eat more of my calories. And that's a good way to get
Mm-hmm.
by in. Again, it's not going to be the most important thing, right? But
Yeah.
it is, again, still going to help with our nutrient partitioning. So that, like eating more throughout the earlier part of the day is very beneficial. And oftentimes what we see is your biofeedback will change a lot. Suddenly it's, oh wow, I have so much more energy. I have so much more libido. I feel so much better. I can push harder in my training. I'm recovering better. And as a result of that, again, we're going to build more muscle. You'll be more active. You'll probably burn more calories throughout the day. And even if you look at like the chrononutrition research, um, again, not that like I always want to be careful with this because it's not that like eating at night makes you gain fat, or of course, as again you're aware, but there is some interesting research that seems to indicate when we do bias more of our calories towards the earlier part of the day, we do
Mm-hmm.
typically expend more energy throughout the day as well, right? So from a body recomposition perspective, that can be beneficial. But really, again, it's going to be specific to when that person trains. Just most of our clients happen to train pretty early in the morning. So that's going to be an important aspect of it. Alongside that, we're also typically looking at things like a lot of people's digestion just isn't in a very good place. Now, your digestion is going to be important because that's going to really help dictate your body's ability to actually use these nutrients that you're taking in for things like supporting thyroid, supporting sex hormone production, building muscle, right? Where many of the clients who start with us are either, hey, I'm chronically constipated, or basically everything just runs straight through me. To where looking at things like how are we managing our stress? How are we chewing our food thoroughly? Are we not drinking so much water with each bite that we are just like washing that down and not actually chewing it fully and digesting it? Oftentimes, even digging into food sources more, because a lot of times as well, like clients coming in the scenario will come from a background of I'm eating a lot of like flexible dieting foods, so a lot of like Quest bars and things of that nature, to where oftentimes we do see more digestive issues stemming from that, or even like I'm eating a huge amount of food volume because I'm trying to keep calories as low as possible. So I'm trying to do this to keep me full, which oftentimes is like, hey, so I'm eating a ton of cauliflower rice. That's a veggie, right? So that's good, right? And to a degree, yes, like veggies, fruits are all very important, but sometimes, especially those more cruciferous vegetables, can actually be causing some digestive issues. And that volume type of eating, pulling that back, people actually feel so much better. We absorb and assimilate and use those nutrients better, and our body composition change is very positive as a result of that. And then again, like less sexy things like your sleep, which typically when like someone, as I'm sure you can relate to, when someone starts coaching, it's very rare that they're like, I want someone to help me with my stress management and my sleep. and making sure my poops look good, right? That's not typically what people think, but those like doing that work is an important part of improving body composition. Um, and then similarly with like the menstrual cycle side of things, we want to make sure, hey, that's in a healthy, consistent place. And that could probably be a whole podcast in itself. But again, different things like stress management, if we potentially need to look at blood work. But first and foremost, again, like your stress management, your sleep, how much daily movement are we getting? For a lot of individuals, when it's like, man, I've tried to keep calories as low as possible, and like 5 days a week, I'm eating hardly anything, like less than 1,200 calories, and I'm walking 20,000 steps a day, and I'm doing like daily cardio and training 6 times a week. Oftentimes, again, that's in a place where we are so run down that our sex hormones aren't in a very good position. Whereas us pulling things back, hey, maybe we're training 4 days a week, rather than you doing 5, 6 sets of everything. Maybe we're pulling this back to 2 sets, and we're just maximizing the quality of that. Better exercise selection, better execution. We're reducing the amount of movement you're doing. Although it's scary, it is crazy to see because again, your body is in a healthier, more responsive place. Again, those things were down regulated, like your sex hormones, your thyroid, getting those in a better place. Suddenly, our body is so much more responsive, despite it like sometimes feeling like we're doing less. We can see very positive changes there. Um, from a high level, that's kind of the nutrition side of things. Now, do you want me to dig into the training, or do you have follow-up questions on that?
Yes. So I was wondering, in terms of something that I often do with my clients, is I
Hmm.
start with a regular eating schedule, as you've mentioned,
Right.
because I also get a lot of people who backload their calories to the end of the
Yeah.
day
Hmm.
because they tell me, I don't want to be hungry going to bed. And I'm
Right.
like, you're
Right.
hungry because you're not eating during the day.
Right. Right.
So I'm wondering, how do you implement that with your own client? What kind of recommendations do you give?
Absolutely. And again, it can definitely be a scary thing and hard to let go of. I get it, right? It's so there's no shame here because for many people, especially, there's almost always like a, hey, I always have this snack before bed. And letting go
Hmm.
of that specifically is almost always the scariest thing, right?
Hmm.
Because again, most people in this situation have been so hungry by the end of the day for so long, and that's just so much what they're used to, that like changing that is scary because what if I don't have something to deal with that with? So as you mentioned, like a lot of it comes down to education with understanding like, hey, a big part of this is I want you to understand that why we're so hungry is because we're in this position where you've been keeping calories so low, right?
Hmm.
You feel like you need this snack because it's a lot of times like your only like joy you get from food throughout a lot of the day. Whereas again, the rest of the day is just like very bland foods, trying to keep calories as low as possible. Then oftentimes this is
Hmm.
again like the like cookie dough creamy or whatever it may be, right? Um, where also what I like to illustrate here is you've been living in a place of calorie restriction for so long. We're not in that place anymore. We're in a place of abundance now. So there is no shortage of food here. So we don't
Hmm.
have to be in this place where we worry about this anymore. We're in a place where you're going to have plenty of food to eat, right? So again, this is typically a slow transition. So typically what I do there is I will almost always start with, okay, first and foremost, what I want you to focus on is just a pre-workout meal, right? And again,
Yes.
most clients training early, we're going to implement that first. Most clients training early, that can be the hardest thing to like actually implement in because it is like I would much rather spend those calories at the end of the day. Whereas I'm not even hungry in the morning. I feel like I'm wasting them there. I actually have to like actively try to get that
Hmm.
down. And that's typically a situation where I will communicate, hey, I want you to just trust me on this. First, I will never ask you to do anything that I think is going to lead you to worse results. I might ask you in the short term to do things that you aren't comfortable with because that's what needed for you to be in a healthier position.
Hmm.
But my success as a coach is based on our business runs on us being able to help you get results. So I will never ask you to do anything that's going to be worse for your results. What I want to do is let's just try this for 3 days. And if you don't feel better, if it's a challenge, if you don't feel better, if you think it makes things worse, we can pull it out. No, I've never had someone like after that. Can you give me just 3 days? Let's see how you feel. And we can always adjust from there. I've never had
Hmm.
someone actually like want to pull that back. After it's almost always like, oh wow, I do feel so much better, right? I get it now. And then typically what we see as well is, cool, okay. And honestly, within that, I will typically still like, if you want to have that like snack at night or eat more of that food at night, that's perfectly fine. If you're hungry, I want you to feel free to eat, right? It's okay. Um, and almost always what we'll see is almost immediately there will be a downturn in hunger. I actually haven't ever had someone go through this situation where it's, oh damn, I'm gaining a ton of weight now, right? It's almost always, wow, I feel so much better. And I feel like I am eating more food throughout the day, I'm more full throughout the day, but I'm seeing I'm not like suddenly gaining a lot of body fat like I was scared of. In fact, I can see my muscles already growing. I can see myself, like my body does look a little bit tighter. I can see my physique changing. And then there's typically buy-in to, okay, cool. Let's go ahead and continue to implement these things, right? So then it'll
Hmm.
typically be, okay, here's what I want like the post-workout meal to look like. Here's how we may structure that. And then setting up the rest of the schedule throughout the day. But honestly, I really think that like again, because it's pretty specific to almost everyone we work with trains in the morning, implementing that first and people seeing the difference that makes, because it does seem to have a pretty big impact on hunger throughout the rest of the day as well.
Hmm.
Then we get so much buy-in for, okay, now I'm down to continue with implementing the rest of this. So from there, it's typically pretty easy. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that we dug into this because, as I've said, it's very common for people to have a dysregulated eating schedule before we
Right.
even touch calories and macros. So
Right.
that's where I typically start. And just as an aside for the listeners, even if you're not in this particular position, dear listener, where you have been in a chronically underfueled state,
Mhm.
but you might have other reasons why you find yourself overeating at night and grazing throughout the day. For example, a very common example would be if you take ADHD medication or if you have ADHD to begin with,
Yeah,
your hunger levels, your hunger hormones are going to be a little bit dysregulated. You're not going to be able to understand your appetite as somebody who is neurotypical would be able to. So you
right.
might believe that you are not very hungry and you don't really have an appetite, especially around the time that you take your medication. And then you end up, that hunger catches up with you at the end of the day, which is why even if you're not necessarily, you don't believe that you're chronically under fueling, you might still want to look into your eating schedule if you're in a situation like that.
Absolutely. And in an instance like that, again, like similarly, yeah, ADHD medications do play a big role as well. And similarly, or some people, it's just like I don't have time to like eat a full
Yeah.
meal before I train, or again, I just really don't have much appetite. That's when we might bias, like, hey, okay, so let's go with some liquid sources, right? So maybe again, we're going to have you do basically like in that pre-workout meal when someone's just training early. We basically want to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, so we can do that via means of, depending on the size of the individual, probably something like 20 to 40 grams of protein,
Mm-hmm.
or that can just come from the essential amino acids within that protein, right? So
Mm-hmm.
basically, we could go with like an EAA powder, which is again just
Mm-hmm.
going to be basically think like imagine it's almost like a whey protein, but it's broken down further. So
Mm-hmm.
that'll basically just be like flavored water that you're drinking. And maybe we're gonna start with just like 20 to 25 grams of carbs, liquid carbs. So maybe it's like a shake where it's 20 to 30 ounces of water. That hydration is going to be important. And again, that's not going to just be water, but also sodium. So probably we're going to put like a fourth teaspoon of pink salt in there. Again, some essential amino acids. So where we're getting like 3+ grams of leucine within that. And then maybe something just like 20 to 30 grams of carbs from something like a Gatorade powder, right? To where that's essentially just like flavored water. But if we start sipping that as soon as we can in the morning, and again, try to finish that by like the halfway point of our training session, you'll immediately see, like, wow, my performance
Yeah.
is better, my recovery is better. And that can be a good start there. And also, like, will of course help people like, hey, if I really just really don't have much appetite in the morning, which again, like, the things like that can definitely impact it. It's also typically like your bodies will have to, it will take a bit of time to adapt to this new rhythm and get used to eating in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll typically find you can, I honestly, for most people, within a matter of a week, you'll adapt and find, oh wow, this isn't nearly as hard as I thought it was, and I actually feel much better doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's all the thoughts I have on that actually.
Yeah, no, I completely understand and agree with your approach as well. It's very similar to what I do, which is interesting to find out. Whenever I talk to another coach on the podcast, it's very interesting to compare methods for me.
Absolutely, absolutely same.
So now moving into the training side of things, where is it that you would start with a new client then?
Absolutely. So, um, within this, again, the most important thing is going to be we need to make sure that our training is actually sending the signal that we need for muscle growth. So,
Hmm.
when it comes to muscle growth, there are going to be quite a few factors that come into this. But basically, when we're talking about stimulating muscle growth, basically we need to generate significant tension in the muscle that we're trying to grow, right? So within a set, we need to generate significant tension. So basically, the factors that are going to impact this are going to be first execution. So basically, we need to be executing a movement well to drive that tension to the muscle that we're trying to grow. So I always use the example of a Romanian deadlift. Like if you're doing a Romanian deadlift, you could lift a lot of load, but if we're not executing that well, all the tension is basically just like, ugh, I just feel my back. I don't really feel much in my glutes or my hamstrings, right? We're probably not driving the tension in the right place. So the execution is an important part of it. Load is also going to be important. Like we could just sit here and you could sit there and just isometrically like flex your bicep, but without adequate load, we won't actually reach the threshold level of tension we need to stimulate muscle growth. And then volume, right? We're going to need basically volume. Think of that as the number of hard sets we do for a muscle group. Volume is going to need to be adequate. That's basically kind of like the dose of the significant tension that our muscles are experiencing. So then when we're looking at like, okay, how does this actually, very conceptual things, how does this actually apply to us growing? So basically, to maximize muscle growth, we need a couple things. We need good execution. The target muscle group that we're trying to grow within a set should be the limiting factor that fails or would fail first, right? So sets taken need to be taken very close to failure. Basically, think again, like there's a lot of debate on this, as I'm sure you're aware of. Like, hey, does training at 5 RIR or higher still stimulate muscle growth? Really,
Hmm.
I think again a good target to aim for is about 2 reps in the tank or less before we would fail, and then
Hmm.
we need to repeat those things enough times to create enough stimulus for growth. So basically, within that, first, it kind of ties into exercise selection, right?
Hmm.
With a client, typically what I'm looking at, and this will depend on the experience of the client, for a newer client to where, hey, this style of training is brand new to me. Maybe I'm not extremely comfortable in the gym yet. I'm not like super up to date on the lingo and things of that nature. Typically, what I'm looking at is how can I put this person in a position where they have to think as little as possible? They can just load this up and push hard while making the target muscle group the limiting factor, right? So the limiting factor concept is very important. So if we look at, let's say your goal, let's say the client's goal is to grow their quads. Okay, so if we look at a couple different movements and the limiting factors, let's say that client is doing a barbell back squat. Not a bad movement by any means, but depending on the person, the reason why we stop the set, again, we want that to be, wow, there's so much tension, so much fatigue, so much stress on my quads. At most, I couldn't do like another rep or two before I have to stop. That's where we need to be to stimulate muscle growth. But for a lot of people, based on the movements they're selecting, it might be with that back squat, it might be my back just starts to hurt and that's why I have to fail. Or my hips are really starting to shoot up, my form's breaking down. So I'm losing tension on my quads and that's why I stop the set. Or my hips are shifting, or my core is giving out. Or let's use the example of like someone doing an Orange Theory workout. Maybe you have, okay, do 30 body weight squats and go on to the next thing. Now, by the time you do those 30 body weight squats, you might be tired, your quads might burn, but are you truly to the point where, hey, I couldn't do more than like 1 to 2 more reps with good form? Probably not. We'd have to do a ton of
Hmm.
body weight squats to actually get to that point. Um, Oftentimes, cardio can be the limiting factor, right? So, similarly, if it's like, hey, I am resting 30 seconds between sets, or I'm going from like, I'm doing a giant circuit style of training, in that set of back squats, it might not be you stop because, again, that tension in your quads, but I'm just gasping for air, right? I have terrible cardio personally, so that would for sure be me. Um, or even things like balance. So even like look at a movement like I love a split squat, right? But like let's look at like a Bulgarian split squat, a dumbbell Bulgarian split squat, or a walking lunge. Depending on the person, I'm also like the most uncoordinated person in the world. I look athletic, so it's always super disappointing in how unathletic I am. But for me, like if I'm doing a dumbbell Bulgarian split squat, I am almost always like at least a couple times in that set, like falling where like my back foot slips off because I'm gonna like fall over sideways and have to stop and catch myself. If that's the reason we're stopping this set, or same thing for like a walking lunge. First, now again, not that those are bad movements. I still like have a large amount of clients who are using those movements with because I know they can
Hmm.
execute them well. But if that's why we're stopping, then again, the we're not going to be getting a good stimulus for muscle growth. Similar, like as
Hmm.
an extreme example of that, like think of the like you always like the barbell back squat staying on a Bosu ball, right? Where it's so
Yeah.
unstable that the stability is the limiting factor. It might look cool, but not going to be very effective for muscle growth. So typically what this equates to is I am trying to generally, now again, there's a fine line here, right? It's kind of where is optimally practical. Um, a lot of times for lower body training specifically, though, it will come out to for muscle growth. If the goal is muscle growth, a lot of times more stable options will be better. So again, if
Hmm.
like I'm sure your listeners are familiar with a leg press. A leg press And there's going to be good options and bad options. And we'll also like look at how does the person specifically move. For us, we review a lot of form videos to make sure that, hey, is this a
Mm-hmm.
good fit for you? You need to tweak your setup. Are we executing this well? Because also that might not be as good of an option for you as someone else. But typically, like if the leg press is a good fit for that individual, again, whereas for that back squat, we'd be training, it's a very similar pattern. We'd be training very similar tissues to that back squat. But whereas for that back squat, we have to worry about like, are my hips shifting? Is my butt shooting up as I'm getting closer to failure? Is my core strong enough? For that leg press, we are in a very stable position to where it's essentially, hey, push your feet here. We want to go basically, we want to get as much movement as we can without your butt or your lower
Mm-hmm.
back leaving the pad. I want you to control the lowering portion and just push this very hard. And it is so easy there for us to, because again, we take out a lot of those variables as far as stability, right? That we don't
Mm-hmm.
have in the back squat. So it's so much easier for us to, okay, it's almost hard for us to basically go to as long as we push hard, it's almost hard for the target muscle, and we're set up well for the target muscle tissue to not be the limiting factor and to get the stimulus there. Very similar with like a hack squat's another great example of that. And I think like again, like I'm definitely not opposed to like dumbbells, barbells, cables. Those are all great options as well, right? Um, I think specifically for lower body training though, this has a lot of application because for a lot of individuals, even like for glute training, like a lot of our clients' goal is to build their glutes. Whereas again, a lot of times even like that dumbbell split squat, it is so much harder for us to get to the point where like truly like the glutes are the limiting factor because again we're falling over or we're dropping the dumbbells. Whereas like, hey, let's say we do that. That's probably a bad example, honestly, because I do still like that movement a lot. But like let's say we do that on a Smith machine where suddenly it's more stable. We don't have to worry about balance. You can put the safeties to where, hey, if you fail, not that failing a dumbbell split squat is scary either. Well, it is scary because split squats are always scary. Um but if we set the safeties on that Smith machine high enough to where, hey, if we fail, all you do is go like an inch lower. The safeties catch it. It's not that big of a deal, and we can just really push
Mm-hmm.
this up. Same thing goes for like the leg press or the hack squat. So, um, anyways, very long way to say exercise selection is a very important part of this. To basically what we're looking at is how can we put the person in a position where they can just load this up and push hard, and there are as few like distracting variables as possible from just them creating a lot of significant tension and fatiguing that tissue that we were trying to stimulate in this. Then the
Mm-hmm.
second part of that is going to be effort, which again, I've used the example a couple times of, I mean, I started coaching in May 2014, so I'm almost to year 10 of coaching now. And I have had in the entirety of that time, I've worked with one client who right out of the gate was really nailing her training and pushing hard enough. And that was Natalie, who is a coach on her team now. She's
Mm-hmm.
super jacked if you don't follow her. Um, but within that, the effort is so important, right? And truly pushing in there, like truly again pushing close to failure. Now, a lot of times what we'll find as well is a lot of people will start doing a lot of volume. So a lot of sets. Like maybe I'm always doing 4 to 5 sets of every movement, and damn, I'm still not seeing the results I want. So do I need to do more training days? Do I need to add more volume?
Mm-hmm.
Almost always what we see, and I think this is more from a psychological perspective than anything else. Like, I don't think we almost always find that a lower volume approach will work better. So, for a lot of clients, it's hey, we're going to change a decent amount of the movements you're doing to make it more optimal for hypertrophy. And then we're also going to probably pull your volume back. You were doing 4 sets here. Let's do 2 sets instead. Now, within that, there's nothing magic about a lower volume approach. But from a psychological perspective, I know if I go into a split squats and I know I have 4 sets and all these are supposed to be taken to the point where I know I truly am only supposed to do one, like have one more rep in the tank. It is very hard, like those first 2 to 3 sets, to really take it there because it's like, and there's still more, and there's still more, and there's still more, right? Whereas if it's 2 sets, it's almost like, man, we're only doing 2 sets here, so we better make the most of it. But it's a lot easier to, okay, I can do 1 set or 2 sets and really just take this to the house, push it extremely hard. And typically, what we'll see is there is a lot more because clients are able to push it harder there. Like I think of one client specifically where split squats actually is what we were doing, Smith machine split squats. And I was challenging her for like a good 3 to 4 weeks. I was watching her videos every week. Hey, we still have more. We still have more. And she asked, hey, can we add in a 4 set here? Can we add in more volume to progress this? And I said, hey, actually, we're going to go the other way. I'm going to pull this back to 2 sets. You only have 2 sets now. You better push hard here to make progress. But I want you to see that you actually still have a lot more in the tank. And suddenly, when we pulled that back to 2 sets, she was suddenly making progress. And now she's consistently making progress there. But I don't think that, like, in reality, I think that people are a lot more, can handle a lot more. I think our
Mm-hmm.
bodies can adapt much better than is typically put out there. I think that like a lot of the discussion around fatigue and things of that nature almost instills a fragility mindset in a lot of people that isn't needed. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not trying to say that, but again, it's kind of about where does optimally meet practical for the client that we're working with. And I
Yeah.
find that a lot of people, hey, like you're pulling back to 2 sets on a lot of the compound movements, we actually see better results than 3 to 4. But again, then with that intensity portion, showing clients, hey, this is truly what hard training looks like, which again, it typically takes some time to figure out, right? Because it is, you can't, especially for lower body training, that's typically where it's harder because that's a lot scarier.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like oftentimes like having clients practice, like, because especially if it's like you've done only done like barbell back squats and barbell deadlifts to train your lower body, those are pretty scary to fail. Like I've hurt my back so many times trying to barbell deadlift. I'm a terrible barbell deadlifter, where I basically train Romanian deadlifts now and that's it. But same thing like a back squat. If you fail on a back squat, especially if you don't know how to do it well, that's terrifying, right? Um, Whereas like a hack squat, a leg press, it's meant when you squat, and actually like oftentimes having clients practice, hey, with just the weight of the bar or the weight of the leg slide. I want you to actually see what it's like when you take that as low as you can to the point where you fail. And then it's like, oh, I actually just go like an inch or two lower than I would anyways, and the safety's cache. And it's not a big deal. That's very helpful. And then again, like the execution videos, having clients keep a logbook consistently. So you're tracking weights lifted, reps performed, and then it's typically, hey, let's try to just do a little bit more every week. Now, we won't be able to progress that linearly forever. And it will also depend on like the size of the muscle group, how quickly we're progressing. But I want you to very much go into this with the intention of trying to beat what you did the previous week. And then again, for for most of our clients, it's going to be like lower body is a big priority. So we're almost always reviewing a lot of execution videos for weekly for their lower body movements, giving feedback as far as, hey, I think we maybe had more here, right? Here's what this should feel like. Because really, like those last few reps before failure, again, there's going to be with lower body training, if we're doing a set of like, I would say less than 8 to 10, from the first rep, it'll feel pretty hard. That's the thing to understand. And that's okay, right? But just because it's again, it's not going to the point where we're starting to feel fatigue, but again, the point where involuntarily, like failure is going to be the point where involuntarily we truly couldn't lift that weight again, or we couldn't lift it with good form again, right? So within that, again, like understanding that, challenging people to get there, and then a lot of times it will be things like, hey, if someone's like sandbagging it, okay, so we did 3 sets of 10 to 15, and you did 3 sets of 12 with the exact same weight across all 3 sets for your split squats. That's typically a pretty good sign because unless we're resting like 10 minutes between sets or you have very good cardio and very good recovery, typically there will be some fatigue that sets in and your performance won't be the same across all 3 sets. So that's a pretty good sign. Hey, we might not be taking it there. So typically what I'll do like in a situation like that is, again, maybe I'm going to have you do 2 sets. I want you to do the first set, just aim for like 1 rep in the tank. We'll give RAR targets. So reps in reserve, 1 RAR equals you stop with 1 rep left in the tank. Do the first set there. Then the second set, I want you to record this and literally just do as many reps as you can. I want you to set those safeties high to where if you fail, again, it'll catch it right below like your normal depth. I want you to record yourself going to the point where you truly can't lift this again. And typically, like I'll start with maybe a leg extension or a leg curl or a hip thrust where it's again like very easy to fail safely on. And
Mm-hmm.
that'll often show people like, okay, the first set I did 12, the second set I did 19 reps. First, I never want to have to experience doing 19 reps of the split squat again, but also hey, that first set, if that 12 was supposed to be to the point where you have just 1 rep in the tank, but the second set you showed me you could do 19, then that means that was at least like 7, 8 reps that you had in the tank there. So probably not
Mm-hmm.
very stimulative for growth. So those are going to be a couple of the biggest things. Another big one, and feel free to jump in at any time if I'm just rambling. Another big aspect here is going to be rest times between sets. Also very important. A lot of the clients we work with come from a place where it's like the less rest, the better, because that typically burns more calories more efficiently. Where no matter what, I always use the example of like training sessions focused on burning calories are kind of like a sport. I don't know. I don't know if that's a sport is a thing in like the UK, but it's like the spoon fork hybrid where it's like kind of half a spoon and then it has like the little prongs like a fork, like you get at KFC. Do you guys have KFC over there?
We do, yes.
Okay. Okay. I don't know if you eat KFC very much. It's been a while, but they always have the sporks for like the famous bowls. Anyways, it's not a very good spoon or a very good fork. Kind of the same thing with the calorie burning workouts where, hey, even if we're trying to change our training session into we're burning as many calories as possible, we're still not going to burn that many calories relative to like what we need for fat loss, but it's also just not going to be very good for muscle growth. So it's kind of just the worst of both worlds. So
Hmm.
whereas with our rest periods, um, we need to get the best results, we need to take adequate rest between sets. So there are a couple of different types of fatigue. There's going to be local fatigue
Hmm.
and there's going to be central fatigue. So local fatigue will basically be, let's say again, you did a set of, let's say you just did a set of hack squats. Local fatigue will be that burning sensation, kind of that fatigue that you actually can feel in your quads. Now that'll dissipate rather quickly. You might feel like 60 seconds, okay, I'm good to go there. That central fatigue, which is basically going to be your nervous system fatigue, that will take a little bit longer to dissipate. And that's important because our nervous system is responsible for recruiting muscle fibers within whatever tissue we're trying to train and firing those. Now, if our, sorry, I think my dog's having a nightmare, so I'm sorry if that's showing up on the background. Um, if our nervous system hasn't recovered between sets, then we won't be able to recruit and fire as many of those muscle fibers within the next set that we do. And thus, we won't stimulate the muscle, we won't stimulate as much growth as we would if we'd rested a little bit longer. So, this can be a hard thing for people at first. We typically, at the start, depending on the client, most people will just assign rest times for like something between 2 to 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the movement. Um, and then as someone gets more advanced, sometimes we'll say, especially if we're taking like a very low volume approach, literally just rest as long as you need until
Hmm.
you really feel good to get after it. And if we're pushing hard, you will feel much more like you need those rest periods. So at the start, it'll feel like, oh my gosh, this is excessive. I have to rest like 2 minutes. Whereas once you understand like what the effort should be like, it'll be okay. I'm so glad I have this. And sometimes you might wish you had a little bit longer still, but typically, again, there's no like cut and dry, this is exactly what it should be. But typically, when we're looking at like smaller muscle groups, more isolation esque movements, so think like your leg extensions, leg curls, bicep curls, lateral raises, etc. Something like 2-ish minutes plus or minus about 30 seconds is typically a pretty good rule of thumb. And then for those compound movements, and again, this will vary some between upper body and lower body. Typically, basically, think the bigger the tissue is, typically the longer it will take to recover. Um,
Hmm.
so, like again, a hack squat where we're using a lot of glutes, a lot of quads, we're fatiguing a lot of very large tissues. Um, that might be 3, 4, 5 minutes that we're resting between sets. And again, that can be a difficult thing, but also it's an understanding. Hey, we're typically doing less volume, so you don't have to get through 4 sets here. You just have to get through 2 sets and just really nail the quality of it. Or 3 sets. Again, I've mentioned 2 sets a lot, but again, it's not like 2 sets is a magic number. Like I'm sure a lot of your clients have 3 sets or 4 sets or 5 sets or whatever it may be, depending on
Hmm.
the movement. But just as an example, we'll get so much more out of that. And again, that will oftentimes, hey, it seems like you're doing less, but the quality of it is so much better that we're getting a much better result. Where do you want to go from there as far as the training?
That makes a lot of sense. And in terms of where do we go from here, I want to be respectful of your time. How much more time can you dedicate to this?
I have about 15 more minutes now. So it's 12:24 right here. I can go till 12:40, then I'm going to need to hop off. So 16 more minutes.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you for letting me know.
Of course.
So then, at this point, we've covered the basics of training that you
Hmm.
consider extremely important, and I consider them fundamental as
Yeah.
well. On the topic of rest periods, I actually find that when clients start pushing themselves hard enough,
Hmm.
I can leave it up to them to self-regulate the rest
Yeah.
periods because
Same.
they will know. Okay, this set of hack squats really took it out of me. I
Right.
need at least 3 minutes before I can get
Right.
back on it.
When you're taking it there, you won't want to typically hop back in there before like at least a couple minutes has passed.
Exactly. Now, my next question is actually about what tools do you use to track progress?
Absolutely. Okay. Specific to training or body composition changes as a whole.
Both. You can
Okay.
take it wherever you like. Would take your
Absolutely.
question where you like.
So since we were on the topic of training, we'll start there.
Mhm.
A training logbook is very important. So we use an app called True Coach, and I think we're actually going to be shifting what we use here very shortly. But basically, there we have clients track weights lifted, reps performed, and then depending on the client, it will depend on the client. Again, like for someone who's newer and maybe a more lifestyle focused, the more we track, the more overwhelming it typically is, right? So
Yeah,
that's
true.
typically where like, hey, the juice isn't worth the squeeze for us to track a ton of different variables. But for some more advanced clients, I'll also track metrics like, hey, I want you to rate after you did all your sets of your leg extension. what was the pump you got from that like? What was the disruption you got from that like, right? So basically pump
Mhm.
is going to be, hey, your muscles should be basically that cell swelling. Um, Basically the muscle fills up with a lot of blood and different metabolites and things of that nature. So the muscle should feel more full, almost like a balloon. And then disruption is basically going to be that sense of wow, like so basically think when you hop off that set of leg extensions, it could be when we're done with those, damn, my legs are very wobbly. Like I don't want to walk downstairs right now. There's a lot of like tightness and tension here still. That would be high disruption. Whereas if you hop off that and it's dude, wouldn't even know I did leg extensions if I didn't like actually just see myself go through that. That would be very low sense of disruption. Now, neither of those things are going to be the most important variable for hypertrophy by any means, right? Like if we're just
Mhm.
training to get a good pump, that's not going to be the most effective training program. If we are just training to try to get super sore, we just do a ton of downhill running. That's not going to be great for building muscle still. But again, so neither of those are going to be the most important proxies. But it does also give me an idea of just past like what I'm seeing in execution videos and how the movement is progressing, the sensation of tension that the client is getting in the target muscle tissue. Now, again, this isn't always the most important thing. There are a lot of times when we implement a new movement, like I see this a lot with lat training, like a
Mhm.
lot of different, like we show someone how to train their lats properly for the first time. A lot of times it will be like hey, I'm doing the movement, you're doing the movement perfectly, but it's like, I don't feel anything. I don't feel my lats.
Mhm.
That's okay, right? That doesn't mean
Yes.
that we're not stimulating the muscle. Or like I reverse lunges, a lot of glute movements for people who have had trouble building their glutes in the past. I see this as well, right? I think of Tass, who's on our team now as well. Like when I started coaching her, and one of the movements we had her doing was really effective for her eventually was a Smith machine reverse lunge. Now at the start, for the first 6 weeks, I remember her being like, I don't feel really anything in my glutes. And it was, hey, we're executing this well. We're nailing this. I want you to focus on continue to execute it like this, progressing load over time. And then as we continue to build that muscle tissue up, um, there's also like I think it was Joe Bennett, the hypertrophy coach, where I once heard say like, we can't feel muscles. Like sometimes people spend so much time like trying to activate and feel muscles, where it's like you don't feel it because there's not much there yet. Um, which I kind of a tongue in cheek thing, but to a degree that can be true as well. Where like for her, then it was we didn't change a thing, but hey, 6, 7 weeks in, suddenly it was like, oh wow, I feel it so much, and now I know it was like one of her favorite movements, one of the most effective
Mhm.
movements for her. Where that execution is important, but then these things also that pump disruption do start to clue me into like what is the client feeling within this. And for some people, there will be just this also gives me a better idea of even if it's like a movement that I'm not having them send me form videos on, and it's like, there's no pump here, no disruption here. And again, like the pump, like movements to overload the short position more. So like when we're more contracted, we'll typically get
Mhm.
a better pump from that. So whereas again, like those big compound movements where we're training more the lengthened position typically, or challenge more there, we typically won't get a pump out of. So again, not the end all be all by any means, but it will kind of start to clue me in as far as I might want to take a look at this and see how they're executing it further because
Mhm.
something doesn't add up here. So from the training side of things, and then looking at, hey, how is the client progressing over time? How is the logbook progressing? Then, man, as far as body composition change goes, there's quite a bit that we'll look at here. Um, Typically, we're going to be looking at body weight at least 3 times per week, and more
Mhm.
is typically better, but 3 times a week at least. What we want to look at is the average, right? I
Mhm.
really it's very, very rare that I would have a client just weigh themselves one day a week because there are so many different variables that would allow us to like see fluctuations from one day to the next. Even like I'm in a mini cut right now, right? Yesterday I was 208 flat. Now I also got my calories reduced, my macros reduced further yesterday. So I ate less yesterday, but today I was 209, which again, it's those day to day fluctuations, but also, hey, I just changed gyms. I used a new leg press yesterday, which craziest knee flexion I ever got, and my quads are so sore, and my glutes are so sore today. That soreness and inflammation is going to cause my weight to increase a little bit. But basically, point of that being, then what that allows us to look at is how is your weekly average weight changing? Because it can be so
Mhm.
easy to like, let's say that uh, a very common example would be like, man, let's say that you ended last week at 209. Then we saw throughout this week, hey, weight was like 208, 207, 206. And then on your check in day, again, you were like me, you're extremely sore for your check in day. Weight spiked back up to 209. Well, our weekly average could very well be way lower than last week. And we actually saw a lot of progress. But if we were only looking at like one way in a week, we wouldn't actually be able to realize that as well. So we look at that. It will depend on the client, but a lot of times we will look at body measurements.
Mhm.
Again, there are some instances where this isn't needed. Um, Again, if it's hey, we just don't want the person too fixated on tracking all these things, we just don't need it. It is more
Hmm.
so, hey, like we're in a position where, again, maybe to get back down to a body range where a body fat range where your metabolic health is in the best place. Maybe it's like, hey, maybe we're 30, 40 pounds away from that. A lot of times that's a situation where we probably won't need to look at that yet, but we will a lot of times look at body measurements because, again, especially like when we're talking about body recomposition, that's where like things like this do become more important, especially that category where it's you are at maintenance. We're not necessarily losing fat, but we're building tissue and improving body composition.
Hmm.
In that instance, a lot of times weight won't change. Or I just posted a couple client examples where it was like, hey, this client is 2 pounds heavier in the after picture versus the before, but she also looks so much leaner because she built a lot of muscle. If we were
Hmm.
only looking at weight as the metric of success there, she would have thought she failed when in reality she made crazy progress. And we'd see things like, hey, your glute measurements went up, we're building tissue there, but waist measurements actually decreased a bit, we're leaner there. And we'll also look at, so that gives us, aside from just the scale, and there's other things, again, like your menstrual cycle will impact this a lot. Inflammation from training, if we're flying and we're dehydrated because of that, and then we're retaining water as kind of a rebound effect from that, that can impact it, right? Did you eat different foods versus what you normally do? Maybe you had a meal out and we had more sodium than we normally would, right? There's so many different variables that did you eat later than you normally would? Like there's so much to impact weight that it gives us another kind of metric to look at to assess progress. And we'll of course look at progress pictures. Um, and this will vary as well. Sometimes we'll just do like a relaxed front, side, back. Sometimes we'll do those, and then we're gonna have you shoot over like a couple flex shots as well. That I like more so like in, again, like this situation where, and that's typically for more advanced clients who again are like, there are sometimes individuals where it's like, hey, I'm busy and I want like the results with like me having to track and send you as little as possible. And that's not an instance where I'd use this, but for again like the coaches and people who want to out over this a little bit more, those flex shots as well, like doing like the front and back double bicep pose,
Hmm.
right? Like whenever I post my physique updates, I'm an awful poser, but I'm like often doing those. Um, but that can be a good way for us to further assess muscle growth. And then, I mean, we're looking at a lot of biofeedback as well, like how's your digestion? So one thing we'll have in our weekly check-ins is, are you familiar with the Bristol stool chart?
Yes, I
Okay,
use it
so
a lot.
okay, perfect, perfect. So we actually just have to transition to that's in our weekly check-ins to where, hey, I want you to like on average, what were your bowel movements typically like? Like rate it through. So typically like that 3 to 4 would be most ideal. Were you
Hmm.
constipated? Did we have a lot of diarrhea? That's important. Again, we touched on the digestion side of things a little bit before, but
Yes.
typically also tells us as far as like, hey, are we hydrated enough? Are we getting enough fiber and things of that nature? Um, and then looking at different things like, and what we look at here will depend a lot on the client, but things like, what are your perceived energy levels like? How is your sleep from both a quantity perspective, but also a quality perspective? Are we waking up a lot in the middle of the night? That's another important one, actually. Like the sleep is, I'm sure you've seen the same, but I know I've worked with a lot of clients where it's like, Jeremiah, I don't know what's going on. I think there's something wrong with like the way we're timing my pre-workout meal because I feel like crap in my training sessions every day this week. And then we'll go back to, hey, so I also see every day this week you slept less than 6 hours. That's really what's going on here more so than anything else. Sleep is again probably one of the most least sexy but most important variables to body composition change.
Agreed.
And even things like a lot of times it'll be like, and this will again further clue us into, okay, my quality wasn't very good. I was waking up a lot during the night. And even things like, hey, I had to pee, but it's just because I had to pee a lot during the night, right? I always have to pee like 2 to 3 times. Even that is, hey, that's actually still a good sign for us that your sleep quality isn't where it needs to be. Where it's easy to think like,
Hmm.
I'm just a light sleeper, right? Like I'm just more sensitive to sounds, or I have to wake up to pee a lot during the night. Whereas the reality is, when we're entering those deeper sleep stages, your body will actually release more antidiuretic hormone to where you shouldn't have to pee as frequently.
Hmm.
So that can actually be like, hey, we need to dig into different things like what's your caffeine intake like? That's a big one. Alcohol, which again, it's hard to say like alcohol from a body composition change perspective is a positive. I enjoy multiple glasses of wine with my wife per week pretty consistently. Less so like in a fat loss phase, but again, like there are other benefits aside from just like and more to life than just like changing your body composition, of course. But like alcohol consistently, that can be a disruptor of sleep. Your stress management and like, do we need to implement like more of a nighttime routine? What's your sleep environment like? That's gonna be an important one. And then again, things like what are your hunger levels like, right? And depending on what phase we're in. And some people will just have a higher appetite set point than others. There are a lot of genetic factors that go into determining what someone's appetite is like. But oftentimes, like changing our food composition can impact us a lot. Our protein intake, intake can impact this a lot. Again, better timing our foods throughout the day can impact this a lot. But especially like when we're in that phase of, hey, we are trying to make these lean gains. Again, that second type of body recomposition, we typically don't want to see hunger too high. Now, it's kind of like a whole ecosystem of things that we're looking at, right? Because we're also looking at, before it's just like, hey, hunger is a little bit higher than what we want it to be, so we're just going to ramp up food. We also want to look at, okay, what is your weight trend like? How are your body measurements changing? How is your training logbook changing, right? But again, typically if it's like, hey, hunger is pretty high, we'll typically see like, okay, we're actually losing a little bit quicker than I want to see. And we
Hmm.
also will typically see like your training performance isn't quite as good because maybe we need more calories to better support this. Um, Again, energy levels throughout the day, things like motivation, mood, your recovery, even your desire to train is an important one. Um, and there are other variables that can impact this. Like there will just be times where we just don't feel like training and we just have to do the thing, right? But
Yeah.
sometimes it can also be a sign like, hey, do we potentially need to deload? Do we need to look at the way we're managing our stress outside of this? Even like the digestion ties back to your autonomic nervous system, which really controls things like the way you digest food, hormone production, things of that nature. A lot of times, for some individuals, when we are getting to the point in training where we do need to deload, as that stress that we're putting on your body from your training starts to get high and we're really pushing that, we'll see, hey, suddenly this person's having a lot more loose stool. And this is paired with this person's always so excited to train, and suddenly their motivation to train is dropping. And sometimes we'll see even like, hey, sleep is disrupted a little bit more frequently as well. Now, a lot of times it's more common that that's caused by things outside of just like, I want to be careful with things like this because a lot of times it's easy to like, it's almost like the supplements where it's like, I need this fat loss supplement, but it's like, hey, we're not tracking our calories yet, right? We don't need to skip that far ahead. And this is honestly kind of one of those things. But sometimes then it is a case of, hey, this is actually telling us, and we're also seeing in your logbook, suddenly we're not progressing or maybe we're regressing a little bit. We might need to take a deload week to pull things back there.
Hmm.
So those are going to be the most common things that we're going to want to look at. Now, of course, there are other metrics depending on the client. Like we could look at blood pressure, resting heart rate. We could look at things like your fasted blood glucose. Um, Even like digging into lab work is something that we do quite frequently do with clients. But again, that's very rare that that's the first thing that we want to jump to. And again, we want to look at, I think it's easy as coaches to think like the more I can track, the better. But a lot of
Hmm.
times it can be easy to like, and that's what I had that for a long time where it's, I want to take this person to feel like they're getting as much value from me as they possibly can. So
Hmm.
I'm going to give them a ton of things to track, right? Where a lot of times it's, can I identify why this thing is extremely important for this specific person in front of me to get the result they want? Like fasted blood glucose is a great example of that. Oftentimes, like if someone's insulin sensitivity isn't in a good place, there are going to be a lot of other signs we can see. It's pretty rare that it's like, hey, that's actually something for most of our gym pop clients that we're actually going to need to implement.
Yeah.
But so again, like take all these things with a grain of salt. But I would say those are like a few of the most important things that we have clients track.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Jeremiah. And at
Of
this
course.
point, we're also up on time, so I'm not going to keep you any longer. I just want to give you the opportunity to tell people where they can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on Instagram at Jeremiah Bair. I am very active there. We have our own podcast. It is called Living Lean. We release episodes every Monday and Friday. And then our team page is at Elevated Coaching Systems on Instagram as well. So you can follow me. You can check out the rest of the team and what we're doing. But that's really the best places to find us.
Perfect. I'll make sure that all of these links are in the show notes. Now, before we wrap it up, how would you want to tie a bow on this episode?
Oh, man. I would really say, again, if you're coming from a place of it's important to understand that if what you've been doing for a very long period of time has not been working, it's probably time to take a different approach. Specifically for the idea of body recomposition, I find is often very appealing because like we just recorded a whole body recomposition series on this, and so many people reach out and were like, hey, I think I'm that type where I just need to get leaner. I already have a lot of muscle. I think I just need to get leaner to get to where I want to be. And again, sometimes that's the case. A lot of times what I see is, hey, actually, you're already a very lean person and you've been chronically dieting, chronically underfueled for years and years and years. And to get a different result, probably going to have to do the uncomfortable and go to that place where we're not trying to diet, at least for a period of time, in order to ultimately get the physique you want. So, especially if you're coming from that place, understand that like it's normal for this to be scary and intimidating. And that's where I would encourage you to hire a coach to guide you through this, right? Because it can be very scary and intimidating to do this on your own. But understanding that people typically just associate, which I hate that this is how it is, because it's so cool to show someone, as I'm sure you've experienced as well, how
Hmm.
good your life can be, how good you can feel, and how great you can feel in your body, while also actually being well fueled and feeling good, rather than just like I'm chronically trying to starve myself. Um, but if that's the approach you've been taking, understand that again, food just doesn't, it's not like more food doesn't equal like more fat gain. Oftentimes it's what's needed to have a healthier, more responsive body and actually ultimately get the results you want. It can elicit very positive changes. And also, at least for me, life is just so much better when I'm eating more food. So I think that would be that. And then again, with the training, really focus on the quality over the quantity. People are typically focused on, okay, if what I'm doing right now isn't getting results, I just need to add more. Where oftentimes it's, hey, we don't need more, we just need better. And better might actually entail, we might need to do half as much as what you're doing, but really just focus on improving the quality of that, and we'll get a much better result. So I think that's really how I would tie a bow on all of it.
That's splendid. I agree with everything. I have nothing more to add. So, Jeremiah, it seems like we coach in a very similar way, which,
I'm not surprised to hear that.
that's why I said at the beginning, why are you so awesome at it? Because that's how I truly feel
I
about
love it. Okay.
it.
Oh, a little plug
Yes.
for yourself then. Okay. I like it.
Yeah, because I'm amazing too. And I only choose amazing people for the podcast. But to wrap it up, thank you very much for your time, Jeremiah. Dear listeners, thank you for being so generous in lending both me and Jeremiah some of your time today. And until the next episode.
Lastly, if you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.